I'll never forget the night the blizzard tore through Aspen, Colorado, the night my family tore me apart. The Sterling family chalet stood like a fortress against the storm, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the snow-covered peaks outside. Inside, the firelight danced across fir throws and crystal decanters, the air thick with the scent of pine and bourbon. It was a luxurious retreat, a place where my family's wealth wrapped around us like a cocoon, until it became a cage. I stood in the great room, my heart pounding, the warmth of the chalet doing nothing to stop the chill creeping up my spine. At 24, I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. I was wrong. They accused me of embezzling $10 million from the Sterling hotel chain, the empire my late mother had helped build. The evidence was a lie. Forged signatures, doctored bank records, but it was enough for them. My father, Roland Sterling, stood by the fireplace, his gray eyes hard as stone. He used to be a titan, a hotel magnate who commanded respect, but now he was a puppet, strings pulled by my stepmother, Celeste. She stood beside him, twirling my mother's sapphire, pendant between her fingers, her platinum hair catching the firelight. That pendant was all I had left of Mom, who'd died when I was 14, and seeing it in Celeste's hands made my stomach twist. She leaned close to my father, her voice a venomous whisper I could barely hear over the howling wind. "She'll destroy our empire if she stays," she said, her words sharp enough to cut through the tension in the room. "You're no daughter of mine. Leave!" my father bellowed, his voice a thunderclap that echoed through the chalet. I flinched, my breath catching as he grabbed my leather satchel, already packed like they'd planned this all along, and stormed to the door. He flung it, into the snow outside, the bag landing with a thud and a drift, its contents spilling into the icy wind. I wanted to scream, to tell him I didn't do it, but my voice caught in my throat. Celeste stepped forward, her lips curling into a sneer that made my blood run cold. "You're nothing but a stain on this family," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. She raised the sapphire pendant, its deep blue glinting like a cruel promise, and threw it at my face. The sharp edge sliced my cheek, a searing pain that made me gasp. Warm blood trickled down, mixing with the cold air, and I felt it drip onto the snow-dusted floorboards at my feet. I barely had time to react before my half-brother Damien shoved past her. At 27, he was the golden child, the spoiled heir to the Sterling hotel chain, and he hated me for existing. His blue eyes, so like Celeste's, burned with malice as he grabbed my arm, dragging me toward the chalet's iron gate. "Leech!" he growled, his voice a snarl as he shoved me into the storm. My boots slipped on the icy path, and I stumbled, the wind biting at my skin. Aunt Margot, Celeste's sister, stood on the porch, her thin frame wrapped in a fur coat. She was a paranoid art dealer, always muttering about omens and legacies, and she clutched a jade talisman like it could ward me off. "She's a harbinger of ruin," she hissed, her voice trembling with fear, as if I were some curse come to life. I stumbled into the blizzard, the gate slamming shut behind me with a metallic clang that felt like a death knell. The wind tore at my coat, snow stinging my face. As I fell to my knees, my cheek throbbing where the pendant had cut me. I crawled to the satchel, my fingers numb as I dug through the snow, searching for the one thing I couldn't lose. My hand closed around the sapphire pendant, its cold surface, a lifeline to my mother's memory. I clutched it to my chest, my breath fogging in the frigid air, and the pain in my cheek was nothing compared to the fire in my heart. "I'll make you all pay," I whispered, my voice swallowed by the storm as the snow enveloped me, erasing me from the only home I'd ever known. I didn't know where I'd go, but I knew one thing. I'd come back, and they'd regret the day they turned their backs on me. The blizzard had spit me out into a world I didn't recognize, and somehow I ended up in Denver, a city that felt as cold as the storm I'd left behind in Aspen. The neon-lit streets buzzed with life, but I was a ghost, drifting through the underbelly of a place that didn't care if I lived or died. I was penniless, my satchel holding nothing but a few damp clothes and the sapphire pendant that still carried the weight of my mother's memory. I needed to survive, so I took the first job I could find, bartending at a smoky jazz club called the Blue Note, tucked in a grimy corner of the city. The air inside was thick with cigarette smoke and the wail of a saxophone, but it was the leering patrons who made my skin crawl. I'd pour whiskey with a steady hand, ignoring the way their eyes lingered too long. One night, a businessman in a cheap suit grabbed my arm as I set down his drink, his fingers digging into my skin. "You're too pretty to be so cold, sweetheart," he slurred, his breath reeking of gin. I slapped his hand away, my voice sharp as I snapped, "Touch me again, and you'll regret it." He laughed, but I saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. I was learning to fight back, even if it was just with words. But survival came at a cost. I was barely scraping by, my tips barely covering the rent for a roach-infested room above a pawn shop. I was hungry all the time, my stomach growling so loud I'd press a fist against it to quiet the ache. One night, a regular at the club, aita guy with a crooked nose and a greasy smile, offered me easy money to deliver a package. I was desperate, my rent due in 2 days, so I followed him to a back alley behind the club, the neon lights fading into shadow. The moment I saw the look in his eyes, I knew I'd made a mistake. He grabbed me, trying to force me into his car, his hands rough as he hissed, "You're gonna do what I say." Panic surged through me, but I wasn't going down without a fight. I fumbled for a broken bottle I'd picked up from the bar's trash, my fingers trembling as I slashed at his hand. He cursed, blood dripping down his wrist, and I bolted, my lungs burning as I ran. I hid in a delivery van parked a block. Away, curling into the shadows until dawn, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. I didn't sleep that night, but I swore I'd never let myself be that vulnerable again. I was still shaking when I went back to the jazz club the next night, my hands unsteady as I poured drinks. That's when Nico Vega walked into my life. He'd been a regular for weeks, always sitting at the end of the bar, a charismatic guy in his late 30s with a leather jacket and a knack for blending into the crowd. But that night, he slid onto a stool right in front of me, his dark eyes studying me like he could see the cracks I was trying to hide. "You've got fire in you," he said, his voice low but steady, cutting through the hum of the club. "I can help you turn it into power." I didn't trust him at first. I didn't trust anyone, but there was something in his tone, a quiet confidence that made me listen. He told me his name, said he used to be a cryptocurrency trader until a market crash wiped him out. Now he was starting over, and he saw something in me. "You're a survivor," he said, lighting a cigarette. "Let's make the world regret underestimating you." I didn't have much to lose, so I teamed up with him. We started small, using a cramped co-working space in Denver with flickering lights and creaky chairs. The free Wi-Fi was spotty, but it was enough. Nico showed me how to trade cryptocurrency, how to spot patterns, take risks, and play the game. I soaked it up, my mind racing as I learned to navigate the volatile world of altcoins. Our first big win came with a coin I'd picked on a hunch, a risky bet that Nico backed me on. I watched the numbers on the screen, my heart in my throat as they dipped, then soared, tripling our investment overnight. I remember staring at the balance, my hands shaking for a different reason this time. It felt like a lifeline, a spark of hope I hadn't felt since the chalet. I looked at Nico, a grin breaking across my face, and he nodded, his own smile mirroring mine. "Told you we'd make it," he said. Over the next 5 years, Nico and I built something real, Sterling Vega Capital, a crypto investment firm that turned heads in Denver's financial scene. I transformed from a desperate bartender into a poised financier, my office overlooking the city's skyline, all glass and steel. I'd walk into meetings in tailored suits, my voice steady as I closed deals, but inside, I was still burning. The sapphire pendant sat on my desk, a constant reminder of the family that had cast me out. Every time I looked at it, I saw Celeste's sneer, Damien's shove, Margot's hiss. I'd survived, but I wasn't done. Nico became my rock, the only one I let close, his steady presence a contrast to the chaos I'd left behind. We were a team, but I knew what I had to do next. The Sterlings thought I was gone for good. They were wrong, and I was ready to prove it. 5 years had passed since that blizzard in Aspen, and I wasn't the same Amara Sterling who'd been cast out into the snow. I'd clawed my way up, built Sterling Vega Capital with Nico, and turned my scars into power. But the fire in me hadn't died. It had only grown hotter, fueled by the sapphire pendant that sat on my desk in my sleek Denver office. The space was all steel and glass with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city skyline, the mountains a faint shadow in the distance. A single orchid on my desk was the only softness in the room, a reminder that beauty could survive in hard places. I'd learned that lesson the hard way, and now I was ready to use it against the family that had tried to break me. I spent months digging into the Sterlings' lives, and what I found was a gold mine of corruption. Nico was by my side, his knack for spotting opportunities as sharp as ever. We uncovered Celeste's money laundering, millions funneled through fake hotel bookings at the Sterling chain, siphoned into offshore accounts. Margot's paranoia had made her sloppy. She'd forged financial records to cover her tracks, but I found the originals, buried in an old server Nico hacked into. And Damien, he'd been bribing city officials to secure contracts for new hotels, his arrogance leaving a trail of emails that could bury him. I had them all in my crosshairs, and I knew exactly when to strike. Damien's engagement party at the Sterling Grand Hotel in Aspen. It was the flagship of the family's empire, a glittering symbol of their power and the perfect stage for their downfall. They'd all be there, Celeste, Margot, my father, Damien, parading their wealth for the world to see. I looked at Nico across my desk, my voice steady as I laid out the plan. "They'll see what they created," I said, my fingers tracing the edge of the tablet that held their secrets. Nico's dark eyes met mine, a flicker of concern in them. "This could backfire, Amara," he warned, his voice low but firm. "You're playing with fire." I nodded, knowing he was right, but I also knew he'd stand by me. "I'm counting on it," I replied, a small smile tugging at my lips. He sighed, but the corner of his mouth quirked up. "Then I'm with you," he said, and I felt a surge of gratitude for the man who'd never let me down. I leaned back in my chair, my hand brushing against the sapphire pendant on my desk. It caught the light, its deep blue a mirror to the storm in my heart. I thought of that night in the chalet, Celeste's sneer, Damien's shove, Margot's hiss, my father's betrayal. They thought I'd break, that I'd disappear into the snow and never come back. But I was still here, stronger than ever, and I'd show them just how wrong they were. "They thought I'd break," I whispered to myself, my fingers closing around the pendant. "I'll show them I'm unbreakable." The plan was set, the pieces in place. In a few days, I'd walk back into their world, not as the girl they'd banished, but as the woman who'd tear their empire apart. I stood, slipping the pendant into my pocket, and glanced at Nico. "Let's get ready," I said, my voice firm. The Sterling Grand Hotel was waiting, and so was my revenge. I'd spent 5 years preparing for this moment, and as Nico and I left Denver behind, the reality of what I was about to do settled in like a stone in my chest. The drive back to Aspen felt like a journey through time, the snowy peaks looming. In the distance, as Nico and I approached the Sterling Grand Hotel, their jagged edges a haunting echo of the blizzard that had banished me. I'd left this place a broken girl, cast out into the snow with nothing but my mother's sapphire pendant, but tonight I was returning as a force they couldn't ignore. The hotel's golden lights glowed against the night, a cruel reminder of the empire that had tried to erase me, and my heart thundered as I stepped out of the car, the pendant at my throat glinting like a shard of ice. The ballroom was a vision of decadence, ice sculptures of doves shimmering under crystal chandeliers, string quartets weaving melodies through the air, and champagne towers cascading like liquid starlight. Aspen's elite swirled around me in their silks and diamonds, their laughter a hollow echo as I walked in, my sapphire blue gown trailing behind me like a battle flag. Every step felt like a march to war, and I could feel the weight of every eye on me, their whispers slicing through the music like knives. Celeste saw me first, her crimson gown a slash of blood against the opulence, her platinum hair coiled like a serpent ready to strike. She stood by an ice sculpture, a champagne flute trembling in her hand, and her voice cut through the crowd like a whip. "What's this disgrace doing here?" she hissed, her words venomous, her eyes narrowing with a hatred that made my skin crawl. Damien, my half-brother, turned from his fiancée's side, his tuxedo pristine but his smirk as ugly as I remembered. At 27, he was the golden heir, basking in his engagement party, but to me he was still the boy who'd shoved me into the snow. "Still a fraud, are you?" he sneered, his voice loud enough to make the guests around us freeze, their champagne, flutes hovering midair. My pulse raced, but I forced a smile, cold and sharp, as I pulled the sleek tablet from my clutch. "A gift for your engagement," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me, and I handed it to him, my fingers brushing his with a deliberate calm that made his smirk falter. Damien, always eager to play the king, decided to make a show of it. He connected the tablet to the ballroom's projector, a massive screen flaring to life behind him as he grinned at the crowd, his fiancée clinging to his arm. "Let's see what my dear sister has brought us," he said, his tone dripping with mockery, but I could see the flicker of unease in his eyes. I held my breath, my nails digging into my palms, as the screen lit up with the truth I'd spent years uncovering. Celeste's money laundering, millions siphoned through fake bookings, her offshore accounts exposed in stark black and white. Margot's forged records, the ones that had framed me, her handwriting a damning signature, and Damien's bribery deals, emails detailing payments to city officials, each one a nail in his coffin. The string quartet screeched to a halt, the room erupting in gasps, and I stepped forward, my voice a blade cutting through the chaos. "They framed me for 10 million, I shouted, my words echoing off the marble walls. "Now the FBI is waiting, outside." The crowd recoiled, a collective inhale that sucked the air from the room, and I felt the ground shift beneath me, the moment I'd dreamed of finally here. Celeste's face contorted with rage, her composure shattering like glass. She screamed, a raw, guttural sound, and hurled her champagne flute at me with all her strength. I ducked, the glass shattering against an ice sculpture behind me, shards flying like deadly confetti, one grazing my arm with a sting that made me gasp. Damien roared, his face red with fury, and lunged at me, his hands outstretched like he wanted to choke the life out of me. "I'll kill you for this," he bellowed, but I sidestepped, my heart pounding as security tackled him to the ground, his fiancée screaming as he thrashed against their grip. Margot, near the champagne towers, clutched her jade talisman, her eyes wide with terror. "The curse! The curse!" she shrieked, her voice a wail as she collapsed, her body crumpling to the floor in a heap of fur and fear, the talisman rolling away like a discarded omen. I turned to my father, Roland, who sat in a wheelchair at the edge of the room, his frail frame trembling, his gray eyes glistening with tears. "Amara, I failed you," he whispered, his voice breaking, and for a moment, I saw the man he used to be the father who'd once loved me. But the memory of that blizzard night, the gate slamming shut, his silence as I begged, flooded back, and I felt my throat tighten with unshed tears. I pulled a cracked photo from my clutch, one of me, him and Mom, and pressed it into his shaking hands. "You chose power over me," I said, my voice raw but firm. "Enjoy the ruins." I turned away, my chest aching, as FBI agents stormed in, their shouts drowning out the chaos, cuffing Celeste and Damien while medics rushed to Margot. I walked through the crowd, their horrified whispers a distant hum, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. I'd done it. I'd torn their empire apart, exposed their lies for all to see, but the victory felt hollow, the pendant at my throat a heavy reminder of what I'd lost to get here. I needed to leave, to find something beyond this pain. Nico was waiting in the lobby, his dark eyes searching mine as I stepped out of the ballroom, my hands trembling. "It's done," I said, my voice cracking, the weight of it all crashing down. He took my hand, his touch grounding me. "Let's go somewhere far from here," he said, and I nodded, knowing I needed to heal, to find peace after the storm I'd just unleashed. Nico and I left Aspen behind that night, the weight of my family's downfall heavy on my shoulders, but his hand in mine was a quiet promise of something better. We drove west, far from the snowy peaks that had haunted me, until we reached a coastal villa in Oregon, a sanctuary perched on cliffs where the waves crashed with a rhythm that felt like healing. The sky was a canvas of gold and crimson as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the ocean in hues of fire and shadow. I stood on the villa's deck, the salt air cool against my skin, the sapphire pendant still at my throat, but lighter now, as if it, too, had been set free. Inside, the villa was warm, a fire crackling in the stone hearth, its glow casting soft shadows on the wooden walls. I'd spent the week since the party tying up loose ends, using the liquidated Sterling assets to launch a foundation for at-risk youth, a way to turn my pain into something good. It wasn't much, but it felt right, a small light in the darkness. My family had left behind. I sat by the fire, a glass of wine in my hand, the flames reflecting in Nico's dark eyes as he sat across from me. He'd been quieter than usual, his usual confidence replaced by a nervous energy I hadn't seen before. He set his glass down, his gaze steady but soft, and I felt my heart skip as he spoke. "I've loved you since that first trade, Amara," he said, his voice low and earnest, each word a confession that warmed me more than the fire. "Will you build a life with me?" I stared at him, the man who'd pulled me from the ashes of my past, who'd seen me when I was nothing but a shadow of myself. My throat tightened, but my answer came easily. You saw me when I was invisible, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. Yes. His smile broke wide, and he reached for me, pulling me into a hug that felt like coming home, his arms a safe harbor after years of storms. Later, we stood on the cliff's edge, the sunset stretching out before us, the waves below a symphony of renewal. Nico's hand was warm in mine, his presence a steady anchor as I looked out at the horizon. I thought of the Sterlings, Celeste, and Damien in cuffs, Margot lost to her fears, my father's broken whisper. But they felt like a distant memory now, their shadows fading in the light of this moment. I'd spent so long chasing justice, believing it would heal the hole they'd left in me, but standing here with Nico, I realized I'd been wrong. I thought justice would heal me, I whispered, more to myself than to him, my voice soft against the crash of the waves. But love, this, is my true victory. The Sterlings were gone, their empire in ruins, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. I squeezed Nico's hand, a smile tugging at my lips, and I knew this was just the beginning, a new chapter, one I'd write on my own terms, with the man who'd never stopped believing in me. If this story struck a chord with you, show your support with a like. And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Story for more gripping tales of justice, betrayal, and redemption. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment and share your own experiences. Every word you write helps build a strong, connected community where we can all share, heal, and empower one another. Stay tuned for even more intense, thought-provoking stories coming soon.